Well, good morning. It's good to see this number out today. We're glad you're here. We are, as already been mentioned, excited about this week as we begin West Tennessee Work Camp, and grateful that we've already got some that are here with us, and ask you to keep praying for all the congregations, youth groups that will be traveling to us later on today, and we're looking forward to tonight and throughout this week having them with us and all the great things that are going on. I want to tell you how much I appreciate, and I'll try to, you'll hear this several times, I'm sure, from the elders and from Adam and different ones, but how much we all appreciate everyone in this congregation working so hard. This kind of event does not take place unless you have a congregation full of people willing to work, willing to get their hands dirty, willing to be a part of what's going on. And so many of you have volunteered, not just in one or two ways, but in multiple ways. And I know I speak for Adam and for the elders to let you know how much we appreciate all that you have done and will do this week as a part of this work camp. I'm thankful for the elders and for their willingness to be a part of this great work. And I'm really grateful for Adam. Really, last year when we worked together in work camp was the first big project we got to work together with, and learned a lot about the caliber of man that he is and the servant's heart that he has, and I just appreciate him and love him so much. And even though he is no longer laboring in that sort of capacity, he still has a wonderful ministry he's doing in counseling, but he has volunteered his time to take care of all of this, and that's meant a lot of extra hours for both he and Lana as they've worked getting ready for this. And this week, of course, they'll be doing a lot behind the scenes, and we're just grateful for them and for all they do. So appreciate everyone and how much that you've invested into this week, and we just pray that God will work through us to do wonderful and great things this week. When we think about the one word that we've been studying and in this series of lessons on relationships and how we're connected with each other, the one word that would probably best fit what we're going to be involved in this week is the word that we're going to study this morning, and really talk about, you know, some of the reasons why that you want to be here all through this week, because our word this week is Christian. And we think about Christian, the word that's translated Christian just simply means someone who is associated with Christ. As much as we talk about Christians and being Christians and those types of things, really the word is only found 3 times in our New Testament, and twice in Acts and once in 1 Peter. It is a word, though, that so many in the religious world especially has corrupted to some extent. It's become a word that means anyone who does anything of the slightest hint that leans towards Jesus or associates in any way by word with what Jesus is or says, irregardless of what they do in their lives. But what we want to focus on this morning is the idea that being a Christian is something more than just what we claim. It's more than just a title that we wear on a tag that says, "Hello, I'm a Christian." That being a Christian is just that. It's something that we are. And what we do is what enables us to see, or people to see, that we are Christians. We're going to be labeled in whatever capacity in life that we're involved in, aren't we? You know, there's all kinds of labels that we wear. And some of those labels are labels that we have earned because of maybe the way we dress. Maybe it's labels about how tall we are, or short we are, or skinny we are, or wide we are. Maybe it's because we have a lot of hair or don't have a lot of hair. Maybe it's something that we've been involved with, though, most of the time. You know, there's some people that wears, for example, the label of veteran. My daddy is a veteran, and he wears a cap all the time that says United States Army, retired. You know, he's a veteran. And some of those labels we're proud of. Some labels we wear we're not so proud of, though, right? But whatever those labels are, in large part, they've been earned by things that we have done or maybe not done in our lives, see? And so when we think about what it means to be a Christian, it's about what we're doing, see? In Acts chapter 25, or excuse me, in Acts chapter 26, he's going to tell us that being a Christian is something that we can be convinced to become. In Acts chapter 11, we see that those people that were there that Fred read for us just a few moments ago, they were called Christians. And sometimes, as in the article that's in the bulletin this week shows, there's some that thinks that was a name given to them by people from the outside world, but really and truly it was a name that was given by God. But why was it they were called Christians? 1 Peter chapter 4, he talks about how that we can receive glory if we suffer as a Christian. So Christian is a label, but it's something that's earned because of what we do, see? Being a Christian is something that we do. Now, our theme this week in all of our lessons for our devotionals is the word that you see above me. Why? Because if you remember last year, after the work camp was over, and I assume it was this way when y'all had work camp in Martin and McKenzie and other places, but everyone in our community, that was probably the question we heard the most, right? Why? Why did all these teenagers come to paint houses in the summer? Why is there a group from Alabama up here in West Tennessee work camp? You know, why is it that y'all are downtown at the gazebo singing songs late on a Wednesday night? Why is it that I see all these church buses traveling all over town all week long? Why is it that Jason Smith is walking out of McDonald's with 50 sausage and biscuits? You know, why? And so all of our lessons that the youth ministers and preachers that are coming with these groups that are going to be focusing on this week have to do with the four little words underneath that word why. Of serving and loving, of worshiping and fellowshipping. And that's the four things that really work camp is all about. And each night, I hope you're back tonight, tomorrow night, Tuesday night, and Wednesday night. I hope you're back at 7 o'clock. It's 7 o'clock every night, I think, right? 7 o'clock every night, tonight through Wednesday night. A different minister is going to take one of those words and explore why we do those things. Why Christians do those things. Why at work camp do we do those things? We need to know the why, don't we? We need to know the why. And it's important for us to delve in those. And besides the fact you're going to be uplifted with some great singing this week, you're going to enjoy those lessons as well. But here for just a few moments, I want to briefly kind of overlook all of those with the idea of why we are called Christians. Open up your Bibles to Acts chapter 11, and we're going to look in the context of verse 19 through 30 and see what it was that happens that makes these people that are there in Antioch, why they called this group Christians. Now what had happened is this great persecution had come upon the church, and these followers of Jesus, these disciples of Christ, were forced to scatter everywhere. And this is a very important text in the book of Acts, because what we're going to see here in chapter 11, at the end of chapter 11, there's going to be a shift of focus. We're going to shift from Peter to Paul. And we're going to shift from looking primarily at the church in Jerusalem to primarily the church in Antioch. And we're going to shift from primarily looking at reaching out to Jewish people with the gospel of Christ to reaching out to the Gentiles. This follows the outline of the book of Acts. It's found in Acts chapter 1 and verse 8. Right now on, we're going into all of the world. See, we've seen the gospel start in Jerusalem. We've seen them go through Judea and Samaria with the gospel. Now they're going to the uttermost parts of the world with the gospel. And when they get to Antioch, there's some things going on there that causes the people there to see these people that follow Jesus, and they called them Christians. Those are people that are followers of Christ. And we need to ask ourselves the question this week as we engage in West Tennessee Work Camp, and in every week that follows, do the people that see the way we conduct ourselves all through the week in our places of business, in our schools, in our homes, when we come together as a congregation, is there enough evidence that people could call us Christians? Well, there is if we do the right things. And that's what we want to look at this morning very briefly as we talk about how that true Christians act like Christ. And we're going to notice from our text 4 reasons why that they were called Christians. If you're following the outline that's there in your bulletin, number 1, they called them Christians because they served. That's the word we're going to look at tonight. They were called Christians because they serve. That's the reason why that all these young people are coming this week, right? Is to serve. Now, if you look in the text in chapter 11, verses 22 and 23, it talks about how that when the news of them, this group here in Antioch, when the news of them reached the church in Jerusalem, they sent Barnabas to them because Barnabas was the encourager, right? If there was a congregation, a group of people, an individual that needed encouragement, Barnabas was the guy to send. And so they send Barnabas to them to serve them. Now that was a big sacrifice for them, wasn't it? Don't you know you wanted to be around Barnabas? Don't you know that you wanted to be in his class when he was teaching? Don't you know that whenever it got time to invite people over for supper, let's invite Barnabas, okay? Because I really enjoy being around that guy. They gave him up for the benefit of the church at Antioch. There's a whole lot of congregations that hate to see their young people leave for a week. The singing is, I'm sure, not as good in Rogersville this morning as it would have been because we get to enjoy them. The singing tonight won't be as good in Martin and McKenzie and other places because we get to have the young people here. They're giving up ministers. They're giving up their young people. They're giving up some parents because they're serving. Barnabas came and he encouraged because he was serving the congregation there. If you look on down in verse 29, they're going to later on find out that the church in Jerusalem needs something. There's going to be a great famine there. So the church at Antioch and other places decide we're going to take up a collection. We're going to sacrifice our financial means in order to help out the church at Jerusalem. You know, there's a lot of people that have given up a lot financially to make sure this week takes place, right? A lot of people have said, you know, I can't really do anything. I'm going out of town, but here's $100, or here's $50, or here's $10, or whatever. A lot of congregations have contributed financially to make sure this work goes on. It's all a part of our serving one another. All these young people and these youth ministers who've prepared, who have left their homes, are here to serve. A lot in this congregation who have opened up their homes, who have baked cookies, who are going to prepare the meals throughout the week, are people who are serving. It's all about service. And when you think about what we're really doing, it's not so much what I'm doing or what the church of McKenzie's doing or what Adam's doing or what that group of teenagers painting that house over there is doing, but it's what we're allowing God to do through us. Sometimes we forget that and we think, look at what we're involved in. I remember when I was a kid and I wanted to play baseball every now and again on a Sunday night. Everyone from Liberty congregation where I grew up, we would go up to the park on a Sunday night during the summertime whenever there's still enough light afterwards and play softball or baseball with each other. And I wanted to play with the big kids, but I wasn't big enough to play with the big kids. So my daddy would get behind me. All of you have done this with your kids, or maybe you remember your parents in this. Get behind and hold on the bat with you. Remember that? And when that ball would come, they would swing, and I'd get to run the bases, right? That's what God is wanting to do. If we'll just grab hold of the bat and let it's His power that we're working with, not ours, we can hit a home run. If we'll let God work through us in what we do. Why do we serve? Because we're Christians. Why are we Christians? Because we serve. And we serve, number two, because we love. We serve because we love. And they were called Christians because they love. If you look in verses 19 and 20 of Acts chapter 11, you see that because of what they did. When they were persecuted, they went everywhere speaking the word and preaching the Lord Jesus. It's interesting, they didn't preach Jesus Christ because they're preaching now to Gentiles, and the Christ or the anointed, the Messiah, meant nothing to them. They weren't looking for a Messiah. The Jews were. But they're preaching the same message about the Lord Jesus. They taught considerable numbers. They're preaching and they're teaching the gospel. Why? Because they love. And there's never been a greater message of love than the gospel of Jesus Christ. And if we really love people, that's what we're going to do, is reach out with the gospel of Christ. We're going to find ways that we can show the love of God that's been shown us to others. Why do all these teenagers come and paint in the summer humidity in Paris, Tennessee? Because they love the Lord. And I'm going to tell you again, that's why you want to be here tonight, tomorrow night, Tuesday night, and Wednesday night. Because you're going to see it as we gather together, their love of God. You're going to hear it when you hear teenagers pray. You're going to see it in the things that they do for people and the way they interact with people. One of the most touching parts of work camp to me is to see that last night on Thursday night, whenever they walk in with the homeowner that they've been serving all week, and the love and the affection that they show to them. And these homeowners talk about how much love that they felt from these teenagers. And last year, all the homeowners that we have here, the members that hosted them in their homes, some of them, you were very cautious. Maybe if you can't find anybody else, I guess maybe I can. And then at the end of the week, you were saying what? Best week of my entire life. Boy, I love those kids that were with me. And I'm going to work. We swapped addresses. I'm going to keep in touch with them. They're going to keep it. Then they're coming back to Adam this year and saying, can I have the same group I had last year? I really loved them because they loved them, see. They're called Christians because of love. Why are we doing the Lord's work? Because we love Him. Think about the love that these young people have. Think about all of you and what you've done. Why is it you do those things? Because the elders told you to? No. Because Adam asked you to or I asked you to? No. It's because you love the Lord. You ever heard the saying before, the more I get to know people, the more I love my dog? Have you heard that? Well, how about this one? The more I get to know me, the more I love God. And isn't that the truth? Because the more I get to know about me, the more I realize how unworthy I am of the gospel of Christ. And the more I learn about me, the more I realize that God should have just washed His hands of me a long time ago and said, I'm through with Him. But He hasn't. And so the more I learn about me, the more I love God. And it ought to show, and people ought to be able to see that, and they ought to be able to say they're Christians, and I can tell it because of the way they serve. And they serve because they love the Lord. And because they love the Lord, they called them Christians because they worshiped. Notice what happens here in Acts chapter 11 and verse 26. It says that whenever Barnabas got Paul and found him and he brought him back to Antioch, it says that he met with the church, the New American Standard says. Or some translations say he assembled with the church. The word translated assemble or met is the word that sounds like synagogue, and it just means to assemble. The word church is a word that means the assembly. So what he's really saying is they assembled with the assembly. They liked getting together on the first day of the week and worshiping the Lord. They enjoyed that. They wanted to do that, and they did it often. In verse 28, when Agabus stands up, he's among them, undoubtedly at a time when they were there for worship. The church was worshiping. In fact, there was a Roman emperor that wanted to know what this group called Christians was doing, and he sends one of his lieutenants to go check them out. And you know what he come back and told him? They meet together on the first day of the week and they worship this Jesus. And they spend the rest of the week serving Him. That's the Cliff Notes version of his report. They wanted to worship. And you see that in the... Think about all the gatherings we're going to have this week. Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. One of the things that I love about work camp is the fact... I forgot to turn the page there, but I love the fact of getting to hear these young people worship. You know, sometimes we don't have the same energy that they do in worship. And because I may not be very familiar with the song, I'm going to sit there and not do anything. And sometimes I may know the song, but I just sit there and don't do anything. But those young people, a song can pop up that they won't know, and you know what they're going to do? They're going to sing anyway. You know what I just figured out a long time ago? It doesn't matter really whether I know the song or not. If I want to sing, I'm going to sing, and if I don't want to sing, I'm not going to sing. My Uncle Jerry here a few weeks ago, I don't mean to embarrass him, but we sang a song on a Sunday night. He had come up to the front pew here. He was going to lead the closing prayer, and I was sitting next to him. And we sang one of the, we used to call devotional type songs. And I know my Uncle Jerry did not know, that's the first time he'd ever heard that song. He sang every word of it. He didn't sing every word on key. But you know what? I'd heard the song before, and I still didn't sing every word on key. But that didn't matter, see. And these young people, one of the blessings of the week is seeing how much they want to worship God. The Christians at Antioch were called Christians because they said those people worship the Lord. They're worshiping this man called Jesus. They're worshiping the Father in heaven. I think about how many times that God's people throughout Scripture had just stopped to worship Him. When Noah got off the ark, what did he do? He stopped and worshiped the Lord. When they came across the Jordan River following Joshua's lead and they got to the Promised Land, what did they do? They stopped and they worshiped God. When God gave Israel the victory over, fill in the blank, whatever one it might have been, what did they do? They stopped and they worshiped them. When God answered Daniel's prayer, what did He do? He worshiped Him. And when the apostles were persecuted, when they got out of jail, when they were in jail, after they were beaten, guess what they did? They worshiped. See, Christians worship. And then, because they worship, they have opportunities to be together. And they were called Christians finally because they fellowshipped with each other. If you go down through Acts chapter 11, notice all the thems that are there. Notice all the times where it says that the hand of the Lord was with them. That meant that God approved what they were doing. And what they were doing was all of this together stuff. They came to them. They came together. He went and got him and brought him back to them. They met with them. It's all of this togetherness. Now, fellowship is another one of those words that we've kind of hijacked a little bit. It means to join in participation with one another. And we do that in our fellowship meals, we call them. That's fellowship, right? Going downstairs and eating a meal, and it is. But it's more than just once every month or once every quarter, going through a potluck line and sitting at a table. The fellowship that we see in the New Testament was being together, wanting to be together, intertwined in each other's lives, all wrapped up in each other's lives. They were involved with one another in everything they did. And nowhere was that more evident than when they partook of the Lord's Supper together, which, by the way, is a use of that word for fellowship, that participation in that together. And then here in a few minutes, after we take the Lord's Supper, another thing we're going to do is we're going to give of our means. That's another occasion in which that word for fellowship is used. See, it's not just about sharing a meal. It's about sharing our lives and everything in our lives. One of the most beautiful parts of work camp is when these different crews get thrown together with different congregations and people from our congregation, and they meet people and they eat with people and they're staying with people that they've never met before. And when you go home this week, you're going to be best friends, aren't you? Last year was the first year we'd ever been involved in work camp. And Gordon got put with a group, I think the Rogersville group. And he'd come home every night talking about how much that he enjoyed being with them. And then this morning, whenever the Rogersville group shows up, and we didn't know you were showing up this morning, he runs back there to Melody and says, "Mama, the Rogersville group is here." Not since the days of the Revolutionary War did they cry out, "The British are coming," as loudly and as passionately as that. The Rogersville group is, why? Because of that fellowship, that being together. And all this week we have the opportunity every night as a congregation, Eastwood, to be together. And to be together with so many people from other congregations. And that ought to make us grow closer. They were called Christians because they fellowship. Now, They loved and they served and they worshiped and they fellowshiped, but why would that make them call them Christians? Because there were other people that did some of these things, right? Well, if you hold your finger there and you flip back over to John chapter 13, you're going to find out exactly why it is that those four things would cause them to call them Christians. And it's because that's exactly the kind of things that Jesus the Christ did while He was here on this earth. If you notice in John chapter 13, we studied in our auditorium class this morning, about the second half of verse 4 down through verse 17, Jesus, who John has introduced us to in chapter 1 as being the creator of everything, God in the flesh, Jesus washes the feet of these disciples, including one that's about to go betray Him. And make no mistake, what we see in John 13 is not about foot washing, because Jesus spells it out. What it's about is humility and service. And because they serve like Jesus, they called them Christians. If you notice in John 13 and verse 1, it says that He loved them. Those that were His, these disciples, those that He was with, His Father even, He loved them to the very end. See? How much did He love them? So much, 1 John chapter 3 and verse 16 tells us, that He ultimately is going to die for us. That's why Paul's going to tell us in Ephesians chapter 5, husbands, we're supposed to love our wives, the ultimate example of love, like Jesus loved the church. When He saw how these people loved God and loved each other, they said those are Christians because they love like Jesus. If you look back at the end of chapter 12 and verse 50, as they're trying to figure out what it is that Jesus is doing, what's He giving all the credit to His Father in heaven. How many times did Jesus leave from His disciples to go out and pray? How many times does it talk about them? Even here, they're fixing to sing a hymn and then go out to the Garden of Gethsemane and pray. He worshiped His Father in heaven. And when they saw the way these Christians worshiped, they said they worship like Jesus, they're Christians. And then you look in chapter 13 and verse 2. They're enjoying that supper, the Passover supper together. Their lives were entwined with one another, Jesus and these 12. And they enjoyed the fellowship of each other and with other friends that they had. And when they saw the way these disciples' lives were intertwined with each other, they say they fellowshiped like Jesus did. And so they called them Christians, because that's what Jesus did. You know, when you think about what our purpose is, it's to be like Jesus. And as Christians, that's what this is all about. It's serving like Jesus, it's loving like Jesus, it's worshiping like Jesus, and it's fellowshipping like Jesus. It's been told before that Alexander the Great reportedly once singled out one of his soldiers who was accused of being a coward. And he asked that particular soldier, Alexander the Great did, he said, "Son, what's your name?" And he said, "My name is Alexander." And he said, "Well, then you either change your name or change your life." When people ask us, "Who are you?" and we say Christians, would Jesus say either change your name or change your life? We've got to make sure, if we're going to wear the name Christ, that we serve like Jesus, that we love like Jesus, that we worship like Jesus, that we fellowship like Jesus. We're going to learn more about that this week from all these four ministers. We're going to do a far better job of explaining all that than I've done this morning. But that's the purpose of Work Camp. And that's our purpose, Eastwood, every day in our communities and in our homes, is to let people see Jesus in us. This morning, if you've never put Him on in baptism, right now is the time to do it. It may be the last time you have. If you've not been living in a way that shows you're a Christian by your actions, repent and ask Him to forgive you, and He's faithful and just to do so. If we can pray with you, if we can study with you, if you can help in any way, please come right now while we stand and while we sing.